Hey everybody, so I wanted to welcome back those of you who watched my last video from a couple weeks ago, which was a very, shall we say, comprehensive look at the hashtag Japan travel ban. Today I wanted to dig more deeply into a specific aspect of this ban, which is both its main problem and in my opinion is also where the solution lies. And what that is I think there is a dissonance between the way Japanese policymakers perceive the ban and its effects, and then the way it comes across to foreigners like you and I. So I think from the perspective of the Japanese, this is a very complex and nuanced and well thought out piece of policy. They've gone to the trouble of listing 140 something separate countries with all kinds of exceptions and annotations on it. And I don't doubt that a whole lot of thought went into it. Unfortunately, from the perspective of foreigners, this basically comes across as a total entry ban, and it sends a very simple message, which is that none of us are welcome, not even those of us who are permanent residents, who pay tax in Japan, who have Japanese children and spouses, and who make our lives in Japan. Now, the good news is that I think the solution lies in this same dissonance. So, I think the Japanese so far have taken a very complicated approach to rolling back this ban. You saw it first last month with Thailand and Vietnam, where Thai nationals and Vietnamese nationals who are also Thai residents and Vietnamese residents who are on direct flights from Thailand or Vietnam and who check all 5 of 5 seemingly random boxes are able to grab seats on charter flights to Japan and come back and start their lives there. Similarly, in Southeast Asia last week, you had Foreign Minister Motegi going to Malaysia and Singapore and working out completely different arrangements for people that come from those countries. My solution is a lot simpler, and in fact, I can sum it up in one sentence. Anybody who is willing to submit to a PCR test and to quarantine at their own expense should be able to enter Japan immediately. And I'm going to say it again because I want to become a meme. Anyone who is willing to submit to a PCR test and to quarantine at their own expense should be able to enter Japan immediately. And I think that the rationale behind this seemingly oversimplistic policy is that if you're able to take a PCR test and to quarantine, it equalizes the risk that you would present, and if it's done properly, it actually eliminates the risk. This is the same policy that's applied to all Japanese nationals, and I don't think it's fair that it can't be applied to foreign nationals. Look next door to South Korea, which has had this policy in place since April. If you have a legitimate reason to go to Korea and you are willing to pay for a PCR test and to quarantine at your own expense, you are able to enter the country. And the way I look at it is there's basically no downside to this for the Japanese, right? We're going to need to pay 2 weeks of accommodation, which is easily going to be 75,000 yen, probably more. We're going to have to pay for a private way of getting from the airport to the city, which from Narita can easily cost 20,000 yen. We're going to have months or maybe years of paying into the economy through tuition or taxes, and then everyday spending. And there's going to be very little money going out of Japan because I think the cost of living in Japan is so high that foreign remittances from there aren't really a thing. So again, I don't think that there's a lot to lose from the Japanese perspective. And, to speak about Korea again, where this has been happening for months, I don't want to insult anybody, and I know that it's very taboo to compare Japan to Korea, but I'm sorry, y'all, they're beating you at this. And here's the thing, I don't say this with any malice or any pettiness, because I love Japan, okay? I love Japan with all my heart, and I have all kinds of skin in this game. So not only am I a prospective student in a Japanese language school, I have a business that depends on foreign travelers being able to visit Japan, and I am a tourist to Japan myself. And the thing is, personally, once I am able to enter Japan again to study Japanese language, that will then enable me to explore Japan more deeply, so to spend more of my money in places that have probably been hit even harder than Tokyo or Osaka by the coronavirus recession, and then to inspire my hundreds of thousands of website readers to follow in my footsteps and spend more money in Japan, which will then lead to me investing even more of my profits in Japan over the years. Again, it's a win-win-win situation for Japan, and since I am willing to jump through the hoops of quarantining and taking a test and obeying any other rules you set forth, you have nothing to lose. And there are literally thousands of people just like me, language school students, university students. I guess there are some permanent residents and spouses who haven't been able to get through any of the loopholes that the Japanese government has announced so far. You can read a lot of these stories if you go to #JapanTravelBan on Twitter, and I would really encourage you to do so, because I think both the number of people that are affected by this and the specificity of their stories is really important for people to see, especially people in the Japanese government. And I'm sorry that I'm not saying this in Japanese, but I can't get to my Japanese class, so you'll have to forgive me. And I think that more broadly, the Japan brand, if we can call that, it has a lot of residual value and appeal. I think it's very resilient. A lot of my readers, in spite of having to cancel their cherry blossom and their summer and even their autumn color trips this year, are still eager for me to rebook them as soon as it's possible. Some of them email me every week. They're still so excited. People who were supposed to come for the Olympics and who had all that money and time invested are willing to come back next year because they are so interested in and invested in the Japan brand. But here's the thing, is that residual value and appeal, it only goes so far. I think especially when you have a country right next door, and I'm sorry to bring this up again, but when you have Korea right next door basically saying, hey, things might not be normal again until we get a vaccine, but if you are willing to quarantine and take a PCR test, we're gonna roll out the red carpet to you. People will eventually make decisions based on what they need, which is a secure place to live and travel, which is respect and freedom, which is for their host country to give them the same courtesy that their country gives to people from there, rather than what they want, which is the Japan that's largely of their fantasies, and that I think of people are now realizing does not necessarily line up with reality. So, my suggestion is simple. I think that obviously Japan is going to have to ramp up its PCR testing capacity. It's probably going to have to come up with some kind of standardized quarantine system to mandate it a little bit more than requesting it, which from what I understand is what takes place right now. And the thing is, I know Japan has the technological capability to do this. You are a technological leader of the world. I don't know if you have the political will to do this, and I think that's unfortunate. You've had 6 months, very frankly, to come up with a solution to this problem. And aside from a lot of talking and bluster, I don't really think there's been a lot of problem solving going on, but the problem still very much exists. Another solution that some countries have been doing is to require a negative test in the home country no less than 72 hours before departure, followed by a 14-day quarantine, which I think most scientists agree would serve the same purpose. So, at any rate, I do want to end on a note of respect and deference, but with firmness, because I do think that this is sort of an existential matter for me and for thousands of other people. I've devoted years of my life to promoting the Japan brand, encouraging foreigners, my audience, who trust me, who I've built trust in over a decade, to visit Japan, and reinvesting my own profits into Japan over and over again. I've done that happily. I've done that proudly. I can't wait to do it again. But the problem is that when you continue the posture that Japan had at the beginning of this pandemic, which was to treat foreigners different than Japanese citizens, which I think a lot of people, to be frank, could understand at the beginning, because the priority was getting Japanese back in Japan, taking care of Japanese, and we didn't know a lot about this virus, how to treat it, etc., so on and so forth. But I think that now that we're 6 months into this, and that's still continuing, and nothing has improved, and there's no clear path forward, a lot of us are very rightfully asking these questions. Because here's the thing, without being dramatic at all, and again, being as respectful, as deferential as I can. My livelihood literally depends on being able to re-enter Japan as soon as possible, and for anybody else who wants and needs to come to be able to do the same. And I know that I'm not the only one who feels this way and for whom this is true. And I would just humbly and deferentially request that you put a little bit more pep in your step solving this problem, because we've all been really patient. We all cannot wait to come to Japan and do our best and contribute to the economy and contribute to the country and to help Japan out of this abyss. But we need to get in there for that to happen. And I really hope you'll help us do that soon. Thank you so much. Arigatou gozaimasu.